You are about to hear a true story of a man who died, was shocked back to life, and returned with a testimony of what he saw. On the other side, a journey that challenges everything we think we know about death, about existence itself, and about what awaits us when the heart stops beating. Take a deep breath, because the story you are about to hear may change the way you see life. This is I Saw, the place where we gather real near-death experiences. Each one is narrated like a chapter of a book, so that you can walk through every detail as if you were there. If you believe that life is bigger than what our eyes can see, you're in the right place. Our story today is about Brian Jordan, an ordinary man on an ordinary day. The setting, Kansas, United States. Open skies, strong winds sweeping across flat fields, and in the distance, a wind farm. Its massive turbines spinning steadily. Like giant guardians, Brian was at work. In the middle of his routine, when destiny abruptly shifted, everything seemed normal, until a crushing pain seized his chest, a violent pressure, as if an invisible hand had gripped his heart. Cold sweat, shallow breath, weak knees. It wasn't exhaustion, it wasn't stress. It was a widowmaker heart attack, one of the deadliest kinds. Rarely giving second chances, his co-workers reacted instantly. Someone shouted for help. Another dialed 911. To Brian, the world began to collapse into a narrow funnel. His vision dimmed, the sounds around him faded. His body fell, but instead of darkness, something unexpected happened. A new scene unfolded before him. Brian says he suddenly saw himself outside of his body. The first sensation was not pain, but an overwhelming relief. The voices, the panic, the footsteps around his body, they all sounded far away, muffled like they were happening in another room. Time itself stretched and twisted, seconds becoming hours, shrinking to moments. He realized he was no longer using his eyes or ears. His awareness had broken free, and then there was light. Not the sterile glare of a hospital lamp, not a random flash, a presence around him. He saw points of light moving like stars with long, glowing tails like comets rushing across the night sky. He described it as seeing with the soul, no longer needing the tools of the body. Suddenly, he was moving through what felt like a tunnel or a cavern with no ground beneath, as though an entire universe spread out under his feet. But this wasn't a fall, it was a passage. And astonishingly, there was no fear. Only piece of peace so complete. So deep that it erased every thought of resistance. It was as though a silent voice whispered, "Keep going." That's when a presence appeared beside him. A guide not exactly human, but with a form close enough to feel familiar. Translucent, serene, no mouth moved. Yet, words arrived clear and undeniable. It's okay, Brian believed it. He crossed into a place of impossible beauty. A living field stretched out before him, filled with flowers unlike anything on earth. Their colors were alive, richer and deeper than any palette we know. Colors that simply don't exist here. But more than beauty, these flowers carried meaning. Each petal felt alive with purpose. Each form seemed to communicate. And then the light, not a blinding force, but an embracing one. Brian calls it a waterfall of love. A presence that didn't judge, but welcomed that dissolved guilt and washed away pain. In that moment, every mistake, every regret seemed to vanish into forgiveness. Love was not a feeling in this place. It was the very substance of reality. Standing in this light, Brian understood that everything is connected, that every life, every gesture is part of one vast tapestry. Loneliness didn't exist there. Belonging wasn't earned. It was the natural state. But while his soul was immersed in this garden of peace, and love, his body was fighting for its survival. Back in the hospital, machines screamed. Nurses and doctors worked relentlessly. The heart monitor flattened, and then came the shock. His body jerked violently. Another shock. His heart battled against death itself. Pause for a moment if stories like this speak to you. Subscribe now. This channel exists to bring you true stories of those who crossed over, and returned each one told with care and depth. Turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapter. Now back to Brian in the light. He did not face punishment or condemnation. Instead, he experienced understanding. His life unfolded before him, not as a movie, but as a revelation. Every action, every word, every silence, every kindness, they all echoed outward, touching others in ways he had never imagined. This was not about blame, it was about learning. Brian realized he could stay, and he wanted to stay. But then came the message. Gentle but unshakable, it's not finished. There was still work to do, love to give people to touch lives. To change returning wasn't a punishment, it was a mission. When he opened his eyes in the hospital, confusion hit him. It felt as though he had been pulled out of a place more real than reality itself. And the phrase, shocked back to life, wasn't just dramatic. It was literal. Brian had been jolted back into this world by electricity, but returning was not easy. Doubts came quickly. Was I crazy? Was it just a dream? Yet the clarity refused to fade. The peace, the love. The sense of belonging stayed with him, stronger than the questions. Over time, Brian understood that he had changed. The fear of death had vanished. The anxiety of daily worries no longer ruled him. His priorities shifted. What once seemed urgent fell away. What truly mattered, family love. Presence rose to the top. He began speaking publicly about his journey, giving interviews and appearing on podcasts. And he often repeated one sentence, almost like a mantra. I am no longer afraid of death. This transformation reached into his everyday life. He became more compassionate, more patient, more present. Small acts of kindness carried greater weight. Listening with attention, forgiving quickly. Loving more deeply. The lessons Brian brought back are both profound and simple. We are all connected, and every action matters. Love is greater than fear. The purpose of life is not complicated or distant. It is to love better, not as a slogan, but as the very design of the soul. And above all, death is not the end. It is simply moving into another room, and perhaps that's the most powerful part of his testimony. It isn't about convincing anyone of religion or dogma. It's about hope. It's about remembering that what we give is far more important than what we collect. If you've been carrying old guilt, maybe it's time to ask, what would the light do with this? If you've been exhausted, maybe it's time to return to the essentials. Brian didn't return perfect. He returned different, and sometimes different is enough to begin a new path. This was the story of Brian Jordan, the man who was shocked back to life and who returned with a message that insists love is the language of the other side. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And get ready, because in our next chapter, we'll hear from someone who saw time itself in a completely different way and came back with 3 warnings that changed everything. I'll see you there.